back, my little disco babies, to
Want to Watch Now,
where we talk about what's streaming on Netflix right now. And in today's episode, we are talking about Studio 54, the documentary of the infamous 70s nightclub. And we're going to be focusing on how it came to be, what was the idea behind it, what, drama, tea, mayhem went down, how it collapsed and failed, what was the cause of it. And I want to get into a bigger topic subject of what it means to be successful. And I don't mean in a spiritual sense, I'm talking about in a business sense. What brings people to your product? What would be a better angle to kind of maybe revive now in the current day? And just talking about the idea of what makes up a celebrity, and if you could even possibly replicate the idea of Studio 54 today. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say that I think I'm going to take a break from documentaries for a little while, because they kind of are all becoming, especially, I'm specifically talking about Netflix documentaries, they're kind of becoming very generic BuzzFeed videos where you're getting a lot of repetitive information you can watch in any just generic YouTube video or look up on Wikipedia. It's a lot of misleading, and I mean, I don't know, I'm like I said, I can go look up on Wikipedia and get the information in 2 minutes. Why am I having it just kind of drawn out and exaggerated for 2 hours? Or one of the things I hate the most is the constant reminding you and telling you someone is epic and legendary, and it's like, oh, nothing says epic and legendary like having to be told it, rather than just fucking told some cool, crazy stories about this person I didn't know about or couldn't read about in any other book. Now, I would not accuse Studio 54 precisely that, but to me, it also isn't any Murder Mountain or Unacknowledged. Both great documentaries you should totally watch. Totally jaw-dropping on the floor, amazing, suck you in, totally informational, amazing, wonderful documentaries. But Studio 54, I guess you could say it's because so much happened, but the only critique I would make about this documentary is I wish there had been a little bit more, for all its celebrities, for all its, shenanigans that went down, a little more just straight up detailed stories. I mean, because this was open for 33 months, which is actually not a very long time, so much happened. Their goal every night was to make that night better than the night before. This is the night. No, this is the night. So a lot of epic shit happened. I feel like you could make an entire podcast or TV series just retelling people's stories. Maybe that could possibly happen if enough, of the formers die. That sounds terrible, but no one can sue anyone if they're all dead. I mean, I guess our states could, but that's beside the point. Which is kind of funny in a way, because this documentary, you feel like one of the people outside the nightclub. Like, you're getting a little snippet, but you're not fully in it. You're not fully welcome to the club, which is kind of fits with the whole angle of Studio 54, but I'm like, come on. That's my only critique about the whole thing. But let's just get into Studio 54. So it was created by Ian Schrager. Oh my god, if I'm saying this wrong. Ian Schrager and Steve Rubell. Now, ironically, the whole story is told from Ian's perspective, which is interesting because Steve, the way the two of them worked was they were friends, lifelong friends. I mean, Ian even describes their relationship as husband and wife. He jokingly says, I don't know who was the husband and who was the wife, but he was the last person I talked to in the day. We shared a house together. I mean, these people, they were not in a relationship together physically. They had their own relationships, and yet they were more important to each other than anyone else. One thing I would have to say that stands out about this documentary is how absolutely adorable and wonderful their friendship is. Even when it's tested, Ian says, when something devastating like this happens, you either get stronger or you get pulled apart. And I'm getting prepared and getting ready for them to be and our friendship broke up. But in fact, it got stronger even in the most crucial of times. So I think that says a lot about these people. But anyways, Steve was more of the showboat guy. He wanted his face with all the celebrities. He wanted to be best friends with all of them. He wanted the most press and attention. He was very extroverted, even though he was more private about his sexuality and his private life. But that was like his whole thing. He was very well known and beloved by all these people. Ian, on the other hand, was an intense introvert to the point that there was a photographer they're interviewing in the documentary, and he's got a lot of, like, he was taking all these great, iconic, wonderful pictures. If there's, I kind of get the idea there's a book with Ian. Ian has, like, a Studio 54 book. I definitely would want to just, like, pick up that book and look at all the pictures for sure, because they're great, well-done photos. But anyways, Ian was kind of like more of an introvert and hidden, and the photographer even says, like, I have this one photo of him. It was very rare to see him. He wanted to be kind of in the background of it all, which is why I think their partnership worked out really well. They both had an end goal dream and experience they wanted to create, but there was never having to fight for who's going to get the most attention in a very attention-seeking type of entertainment job. Okay. So what was their goal with Studio 54? That's really important. And this is when it starts to branch into, like, the topic of, like, what is success? And we'll get into, like, a whole conversation about that. But now, normally when people create a club, their end goal, honestly, whether they're saying it or not, is I want money. I want money, and I most likely want the ego of being very popular. But it's such a broad topic, they don't even stop to think of, like, well, what is cool? They think, oh, what's cool now? I guess glitter's trending. We'll put glitter there, metallic or simplified is trending. We'll do that. And that's why a lot of these nightclubs don't tend to last very long, because they're just doing gimmicks that are the most popular and new. And it's true, new is always popular. But I would argue if Studio 54 hadn't been shut down when it did, it could have gone many more years, because their idea of success was completely different. First of all, it was incredibly revolutionary that they were so inclusive. Like, when they would accept people in the doorway, they did not accept every single celebrity. No. In fact, you could be a really broke drag queen trying to make your way through the streets and get in regularly and more easily than one of the members of the Rolling Stone. It was kind of crazy. They were very accepting of all sexualities and genders and backgrounds. They didn't care about how much money you had. When they were picking people, and this includes celebrities as well, they were looking for a vibe. They were looking for people who were kind and fun. They were not looking for people who were the same people I addressed with the whole nightclub situation, where they're just looking for the clout. They're just looking for the cool. They were not looking for those people. They were not welcomed or invited. No cheese balls, nobody who's going to bring down the party. And I think that's what happened. They created this environment where a lot of people recount going around dancing around the dance floor and being like, everyone was my friend. I didn't know any of them and they didn't know me, but we were together. And it creates this really fun, loving environment. So one, you have a goal to create that type of vibe. And I'd actually like to more break it down and explain it by saying, like, have you ever been in a time in your life when, like, everything's working out, or you're just in love, or, I mean, I would compare sometimes when you really click with a friend and you're hanging out with them all the time and you're having these fun experiences. It's like you're floating on a cloud and everything seems to go right and all your worries and anxieties go away, and it just feels like you're walking on a cloud because every decision you make kind of seamlessly works out either in your favor or is, like, adds a fun experience to your life. And these are really iconic moments that most humans, whether they realize it or not, are searching for. They're searching for that experience. And I thought it was really ambitious and amazing that that was the goal of Ian and Steve when they were creating Studio 54. So that's what they did. That was the goal every night. So first you start with the picking people, like I expressed, and they did a really good job having a clear sense of who was invited and who was not invited. But you have to say, well, why do I want to come to this club other than there's just celebrities there? I mean, there's clubs all over New York. Why would I want to come to this one? And this is an important thing to note. I think they said they were on 54th and 8th Avenue or something like that. And it was crazy they even opened a club there. It was like in an old opera house, which is such a cool, over-the-top type of venue to pick. But the reason why this is a big deal, and this is why I'm saying it's like a miracle that it even blew up into what it was and how smart they were. But this was a really bad neighborhood at the time. It was like awful. So it's crazy to convince any of these like major players or anybody worthy of note or to can bring more attention to it to come to this club in the middle of nowhere where it's a bad area. It's one of the most, at the time it was one of the most popular areas to get robbed. And I mean they showed videos of like how many people were just like actively getting robbed on the streets. It was bad. So you have this club where they say, come in, we're here to accept you and love you. It does not matter your background, come in. But why do you want to come in other than that? Well, it's because every night was a crazy, almost artistic performance, is the best way I can say it. I think they were using art in its best. How can I say this? Sometimes people don't really, they can make art, but they don't really understand what it means. For me, art is, you're getting something out of it. It's an experience. I understand what you're saying. But in reality, kind of like in Velvet Buzzsaw, it's honestly just a giant like dick measuring contest and who you've slept with. It sometimes doesn't even make sense why some people do well and some people don't, and why an idea makes more sense than another. With this, they talked about the idea of performing, and I think it's pretty simplified. When you go to a show with a band you like or a theater performance or what, I don't know, whatever it is, your qualifies as performing, you know whether it's good or bad, and ultimately at the end of the day you're just going there to be entertained. And they were going there to be like, okay, this is the nightclub and we're going to have like shit going on, so it's going to be a bit of a performance, but we want to blur this line. Because think about it as the performer, you're in that flow, you're in that cloud walking experience like I expressed before. You're in love, you have all this attention, you feel like you're putting on a great show. And they are saying, we want that kind of vibe, that energy to leak over into the people experience it. We want to have people suddenly in the performance of it all. So it wasn't just your run-of-the-mill nightclub where people were getting naked and doing drugs and it was a lot of famous people and it was just a scene. I mean, that happened in a lot of places. When they started showing the pictures, and this is the main reason why I think you should check out Studio 54, to be honest with you, when you're watching the documentary, they show you so many videos and clips, and they kind of happen very quickly, where sometimes there's just like a giant fucking horse in the middle of the studio. I remember there was a shot with like 7 grand pianos and glitter balloons exploding everywhere. It was next level with what they were having. I remember there was like a whole row of women dressed as maids and they were feather dusting people. But then what happened is you have this experience, you have this kind of weird, I mean, you can only express it any other way as an experience because you're rarely do you go to a place where you're regularly like a part of the performance, but you're dancing and having fun and there's all this acceptance and everyone can just be whoever they want to be to the next level. That includes like if you want to get naked, sure, go for it. So it started to then bring out and create its own atmosphere from just people showing up and kind of being like, okay, so like some of the weird ones where it was like spilling the tea, so to speak, was like there was a guy who was a banker or he did stocks. He did something on, he would have been very up to do. He would have been like 2%er. But when he wasn't in suits and like an old white guy, he would go to this club at night and he would wear roller skates and he was like a drag queen with giant glasses and a wig and like that. I mean, can you even imagine if that got out? That could have gotten him fired from his job at the time. Same thing with a 76-year-old or I think she was like Granny Disco or something. She was a lawyer, but at night she was this like fabulous lady. Again, same thing. Like they weren't ageist either. They didn't matter how old or young you were. Well, I hope they cared about the young agedness. But what I'm saying is they did a really good job of creating this vibe. I think it also helped that our main man, Steve, he wanted to really, what's the word? He was so smart about giving an experience. And this is what we're going to remember that idea when we get into more of the subject about success. Okay, so he thought from beginning to end, I want people to be kind of unable to open their eyes from this illusion, this surreal experience I'm giving them. So when you first enter the club, you're surrounded by other people that are sharing that vibe, that energy. They're wearing costumes. It's a whole thing. So you're already kind of caught up in the hype of it all. Then you get in there and you get this whole insane, crazy performance, theatrical designs. I mean, most nightclubs set up their nightclub the first time and then that's it. That's all you're getting experiencing. Light shows, music, disco beat, but otherwise it's just kind of principally a minimally decorated facility. This place, every night, the decorations were changing, the themes were changing. So you're going sucked into this world, right? And if that's not enough as it is, with your peers surrounded by you, Steve's walking around the club with this trench coat jacket with many pockets inside. He's like Jesus in his like Technicolor rainbow, except I guess the Technicolored rainbow is what you consume from within the jacket, because inside the jacket's pockets were like quaaludes and multitude of drugs and even cash. And he really went out of his way to not only, I think to a certain level, it was an ego thing of him just enjoying, sucking up and having celebrities as friends, but I think he genuinely liked making people happy, liked being friends with everybody. And he's going around, he's giving these drugs to people, he's doing whatever he can to prevent them from having a moment of sadness. As his friend Ian would say, he wanted to take that party to the next level. Like, the performance itself that they were throwing together, the booze they were giving, all that stuff wasn't enough. It had to then, heighten your senses, go crazy and stuff like that. So, to sum it up, Studio 54 was obviously a very wackadoo experience that, like, you understand, you hear about it, and it's really cool to hear, like, well, it definitely lived up to the hype. And that kind of jazz. But what I want to start talking about is, like, its idea of kind of success and what that means. And also just want to have fun with the idea of, like, I want to talk about celebrity, and that's important because I think something that definitely made this club important was its celebrity. They talk about how, and this again goes with the business angle. So they were like, okay, we've got a great gimmick of how we put together the people that come into our club and what we want them to experience. So that's enough by itself. But we obviously need the press on our side. So they explained how they made certain deals with the press, certain members of the press. And they explained that if they could get a picture of this celebrity they had with, maybe Steve or something like that. He often liked to be in the picture. And just talk about them being at Studio 54, this picture from Studio 54, and you put it on the front page, you'll get $500. So that was the kind of idea, the motivation for everyone, obviously money. But it became this thing where they were literally on page one, like, every single day with some new celebrity in this club. So you just it's kind of like the Kardashians. It's kind of like an original wave of publicity where you're just getting that constant onslaught put onto you, where you hear about it enough that you could give two shits about a discotheque and just be kind of sucked into the coolness of all of it. Because you're like, wow, I've never seen these two celebrities together. Wow, they're like out of their element. It's like looking inside an aquarium or something, or a zoo where, you're used to seeing them play different characters and smile and take a quick picture, but there they are in like a totally different outfit, and you can tell they're relaxed, and wow, they're I mean, if you saw like one of your favorite celebrities on a horse in a nightclub, you for sure are going to have some sort of a reaction. So it was really smart how they kept up that publicity and press, which then kept the hype, because unfortunately when you work in that type of business, you kind of have to keep the hype train going. But I'm just saying, on a minor note, this is just I'm just adding this in. I think it's really interesting. They should have honestly done this movie like 10 years ago. I think I saw it on Trending, so clearly people still give a shit about this documentary and are talking about it. But isn't it interesting that we've heard like constant hype, constant discussion about the same 100 celebrities for the last I'm trying to think how many decades. Maybe like 40 or 50 years. Just like, you have to constantly hear about the same goddamn celebrities over and over and over again. And honestly, I don't know if people really care anymore like they used to. In the sense that, I don't know, are you kind of like, when you see a picture of like the Rolling Stones, do you feel anything? Do you feel you want to then go check out that documentary because they were in it? I don't really care. I mean, even Aretha Franklin, yes, lovely woman, great singer. We've kind of been overusing and over talking about the same celebrities over and over and over again, to the point that it's kind of fucking tiring and exhausting. And honestly, I want to see other people, be supported. I want their stories to be told. I want that type of, thing to change and revolve. So I thought it was kind of interesting when they showed these pictures. I mean, I enjoyed looking at the celebrities. I enjoyed watching the documentary, but I was laughing, thinking wow, I'm having no reaction or really give a shit about any of these people. That's how I think it's it was an awareness of oh, it's finally dying. It's finally changing. Sorry about that. The train wanted to rear its ugly head. What I wanted to say was that these celebrities don't hold the same wow factor. I just thought that was like an interesting thing to notice. I always have these moments in my life when I'm like, oh, I'm aware of history changing. Because most people aren't aware of history changing until, well, after it's history, you know? So then that gets me thinking about the idea of success and even celebrities now, and could Studio 54 be recreated and all that jazz. Because, okay, so the business angle that I really admire from Studio 54 that kind of just like sucked me in and I loved was they gave a shit about the people they were giving the product to, which was the nightclub. They weren't just saying, give me your money, let me dupe you into thinking you're somewhere cool, and then I'm going to get out before anyone can notice. Very Fire Island. But think about it. Every product you experience, most people are usually trying to do that. They're just trying to sell you on a gimmick and then leave. And that's why a lot of us feel really empty if we buy something and we just don't get anything out of it. I mean, it's the best thing in the world when you spend your money and you really had a fun time in that concert or whatever. It doesn't have to purely be an experience. It could be a product that you really loved. It could be a purse that you were really into or shoes or whatever. But it sucks when you don't get back what you think you're being sold. So they're selling to you an idea and they're following through with that idea. So that's a huge point to note because many people try to sell an idea. I'm sure they do love their product. There's many fashion designers that believe in what they're doing, and when they're selling you an idea, they're making it seem like it's cool because they feel it's cool. But let's be real, like Calvin Klein Tommy Hilfiger back in the day, during like the 90s, his brother or no it was either his brother or him, I think it was his brother, had the idea of giving certain really top, R&B artists at the time, like Aaliyah and stuff, their clothing. And this was very revolutionary at the time. This is like a common marketing tool now, but it was like a big deal back then. And I'm sure many people saw their favorite artist in that outfit and thought, I'm going to wear that and I'll feel cooler. And a lot of the time you're like, okay, cool, I have this outfit on, but dot, dot, dot. So I like that business model that they are trying to sell you on a feeling and then they give that to you. I love that. I wish that was more of the thing. I also like the business model that they are smart enough to understand that an experience is something that can easily be taken away. They're not unaware that it can be, you can wake up from the dream. I think about how maybe concerts would be a little bit better if they almost did something where instead of you waiting an hour or two, sitting in your stadium seat, they maybe had some fun glitter coming down, some type of like almost like a mini party before the party even starts. Can you imagine how hyped you would be if there was someone that came on stage right as people were loading in and they were like showing cute compilation videos, because like how many people love compilation videos of their favorite musician, and they like laughed and pointed out and kind of had like a commentary, Trisha Paytas-esque commentary thing, and so you're all sucked in, you feel like you're with all your close friends talking about your favorite group or whatever, and then the band comes on and you're all ready and hyped. I think that just kind of, I think it's just, like, that's kind of what I got from Studio 54. It's like a lot of business ideas on what it means to sell an idea fully. And then it starts making you wonder, well, could that be recreated? Like, what factors need to come together? And I think, well, one, you need a business person who is so dedicated to their cause, or we'll specifically use the example of a nightclub, that they are not just like, okay, make sure we have baseline like drinks and we tell the press about it, but actually give a shit about the people attending the nightclub. They're not just seeing everyone as a throwaway, $20 they're going to receive at the door, and for the booze and stuff, like, they understand the greater idea happening there, which it's like, do you know anyone like that? I mean, I don't really know the nightclub manager scene, but I don't really get the impression it's like that personally. They're really just there for the baseline. That's a problem in general nowadays. Most people just want to get in and get out, like I said before. I mean, most people want to do the minimal amount of effort for the most amount of profit, which you can't blame people, but there's something so wonderful, and I think that's why people admired these quote-unquote icons of the day. They really gave a fucking shit about whatever they were putting out there, whether they be a musician or whatever. So anyways, you need that. You need this both celebrities and people showing up to keep their fucking mouth shut, because people need to feel able to feel free and be themselves without being told to the press or ratted on any of their secrets being exposed. And like, even if you take away the whole like drug thing, let's say it's a little more legal or whatever like that, you need to be able to know that whatever your performance going to put on wise, there's nothing legally illegal, not illegally. Like, if you bring a horse into the nightclub nowadays, most people would be concerned about liabilities of people getting hurt. They were a lot more Freebird-esque back then, and it worked out, but that's definitely a factor and a fear factor that could happen now that's kind of more at the top of people's like worries and issues when they're going into anything. And I just think, well, we also have to ask about what are the celebrities of today. And this is where it gets into the discussion of like how I had that realization that these celebrities, I just don't really care about these icons as I once did. You know, I'm not throwing them away. They still have their place in history. But honestly, nowadays, who do you care about? YouTubers. I mean, they're still your quote unquote celebrities, but they're honestly so untouchable. And there's a lot of fear factors involved with, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I'm getting psyched out. Oh. Anyways, what I'm saying is, most likely YouTubers would be a better selling place. And to be honest with you, they have more holding power. They get more viewers. They have more quote-unquote influence, aka why that dumb name influencer is used. I mean, you could get more people wanting to show up to a club because some Instagram baddie or some relatable YouTuber who vlogs out of their one-roomed bedroom shows up to this nightclub than you would if Brie Larson showed up. Do you see what I'm saying? Because these people feel more approachable. They feel like they can all hang out together. And that's more hot nowadays as a celebrity, as an approachable celebrity, someone who can realistically be your friend. And I think, well, how the hell is that going to happen? These people all love to open their mouth. So then you have to say, well, when people go into the club, they all have to sign a fucking waiver every single night. This huge, giant legal system of papers every night, all their guests basically saying, I'm not going to say shit. I can't remember what it's called. You know what I'm talking about? Like the don't talk clause. A lot of celebrities have them. So anyways, it's just a food for thought of saying, like, I wonder if it could happen if maybe some people's perspectives change, maybe the social climate change where it was more prideful to keep your mouth shut and be yourself. I mean, people say you can be yourself, but there's for sure still judgment in every community. That includes the drag community. I as much as there's a lot of support, sometimes there's a lot of bringing down. Same thing in celebrity world, everywhere. It's kind of like it truly was a different era. So I don't know, maybe it could get recreated, but I'm just putting these things out there as like interesting factors to think about, because I always like to think about that idea of like, what is success, what do you need to create it, and just how things change and why. It's to me it's its own science, and honestly deserves its own college course, and I'll continue to bring it up with you guys. But to close off the podcast, we'll just talk about how Studio 54 ended. I do want to laugh, by the way, at how dramatic they made it seem. It was very like, oh, I'm glad it was really positive experience when we had the club, because the way it ended, oh my God, like it made it seem like Murder Mountain is the best way I put it. You know how I referenced that before? Murder Mountain is a documentary where as events fold, you just can't believe how much this one event affected so many people and caused a crazy chain of events. And they made it seem like that. But in reality, it was quite cut and dry, to be honest, which I thought was kind of funny. Basically what happens is they're running their club, everything's great, and then eventually word got out because Steve was so boastful. He kind of even made a joke saying, like, we're so good at our business, only the mafia is a little better than us, which is basically pointing out their skimming of, you know, basically illegal IRS type shit they were doing with their taxes and money. So that obviously got it gave the federal FBI people a warrant to be able to go check them out. And that was not the type of shit you want to invite when you're regularly handing out quaaludes on the casual. I mean, it was literally written down in their secret books as party favors. So what ends up happening is they get a warrant to be able to check out the place. And when they go there, they find a bunch of cash that's not marked for Quaaludes, cocaine, like 30 pounds of cocaine or something crazy. And they even find, this is how funny it is, they kept really good books, such great books that while they had, of course, the regular books that they would show people, they had the secret books, but even the secret books were well taken care of. They even had columns that said, okay, at the end of every night, this is the money we're making. This money goes to Ian, this goes to the private partner Jack, this goes to the party Steve, and this is the money that goes towards, they even had the words SKIM or SK for skimming, where the money was skimmed, and even money for all the illegal illicit stuff. So it was so much proof that they were basically able to say, we can get you for a number of factors. And they went to court, and pretty much Steve and Ian went to jail. So, like, it wasn't that much, I mean, it was drama for them. I'm sure it was traumatizing for these people, but it just kind of made me laugh how they made it seem like everything went downhill. It's like, no, and like literally one day they realized you guys weren't paying your taxes and doing drugs, and they just kind of arrested you, and that was kind of the end of it. So they actually ended up even going to jail for 3 years, which is kind of like unheard of. Ian even talks about how they found a guy, and he was like, if you protect us, I'll give your money on the your wife on the outside money, which I was like, ooh, very smart, very tactical. But they ended up going to jail, and they actually would have stayed longer, to be honest with you. But they ended up giving information about other people who were doing illicit activities, which I thought was kind of interesting because even Ian himself brought up, so background story on Ian, his father actually had mob ties and was in the mob. He said that he didn't fully know what his dad did. He was somewhat aware, but he loved his dad, had a great relationship with his dad. And he personally, while he was blamed in the papers for having mob ties, he swears up and down, like, no, my business was my business. Like, even though technically, in a very mafia way, like, you can be in the mob and run numbers and not, be the same sort of activity, but it's like, dude, you're still doing, like, super illegal activities. But anyways, he ended up, uh, basically being like, I'm not doing what my dad does, but it's kind of code when you have like a mafia oriented relative that you keep your mouth shut. So he said that he sold everyone out, but he was pretty regretful of it even to this day because he was taught better, which I was like, well, I'm laughing because you still did it, but on the other hand, like, I kind of can't blame you. You guys were really rich white guys that went into a pretty serious prison situation. Like, you really could have potentially been stabbed or died or something for sure, had your ass beaten. And considering at the end of the 70s when they had that whole baseball stadium disco burning party, it was quite a, I mean, as they put it, a lot of Midwestern people were like losing their jobs. It was a bad economy. Of course, they weren't cared or rooting for the rich white men to be safe or have success. You can understand that perspective completely. But they got out of jail, and then they even ended up going on to purchase and start running hotels. So they had a creative idea of kind of bringing again that same type of environment, recreating of Studio 54, which is basically an experience, and doing it through hotels, which is, again, when we talk about artistry and ideas, it gets really abstract when you think about taking an idea and making it work in different factors. Like, how do you create an experience through a book than just purely writing a story? How do you create hype around the book? How does that become an experience? The meet and greet, so on and so forth. So it's interesting how they turned a club environment to hotels. But unfortunately, Steve suffered ended up, what's the word? It's when you get the disease. He ended up getting HIV, unfortunately, and ended up dying of it, which is really sad. Apparently, even towards the end, when he died, when they were at the funeral, his like mother was like, "Oh, why did my son never marry any nice girl?" Like, she didn't even know he was gay. He kept that shit really private. I'm sure his friends and peers completely knew, but he unfortunately died, which is really sad. And his friend Ian, the person telling the story, said it was a huge loss for him even to this day. But he actually went on to open something like 28 or 38 award-winning hotels. So don't worry guys, he's fine. But that's what I wanted to end on. I'm just saying, like, laughing a little bit because, and this is where I'm like, I just want to say this, like, it's like kind of my like ending note. But people who like are in the documentary world or success or icons have become next level, unreal, unaware. They try to sell it to you like this sad, such a big deal story. Oh my God, tragedy, feel for me. But in the end, while I'm sure, I mean, even Steve said later in years, he still, has nightmares that prison really, caused him trauma. I'm sure it did. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's still warranted. But like, he kind of was a very successful rich man, thumbing his nose up at everyone, getting away with everything. Then he kind of got his karma, he got his due. It was a very small due considering some people serve jail time for anywhere from like 10 to years to 20 to life. So he got to only serve 3, and I bet you that man that protected him did a decent job because they weren't stabbed or anything, which is great. Again, more than your average person going into jail has to deal with. And then they left and ended up being really financially successful again. I don't think that your like average person has that advantage or experience at all. Because even he tries to sell a story of being like, well, when I left, it was hard to get a $14 million loan. I lost my license and X, Y, and Z. It's like, I know what you're saying, and I'm sure you had to overcome a lot, and that is admirable, but like, you're not really, this is a weird narrative to go through. I think you're not fully aware of how you're coming across. That's a problem in a lot of other stuff. I feel like back in the day, the whole illusion or everything around celebrities that were really iconic was just this idea, this untouchableness of like how cool they were, like what were they thinking when they made this, and all the while, it seems kind of like mythical and godlike back in the day, the way they used to sell celebrities in documentaries and biopics, but there was still something so like, I don't know, it just didn't feel egotistical. You're just like, yeah, I mentally support this person who's doing well, like, good for them, or I'm down to hear the journey of their story. Lately, the documentaries have been so boring, and, like I said, there's just an ego that cannot be touched, and maybe it's because we're smarter than ever, I guess. Honestly, think about how quick people are to notice people's facial expressions, know when they're lying. They're aware of all the little tricks and trades of the industry. I don't know, I just thought it was kind of funny and interesting. But overall, I mean, you really should check out Studio 54 because honestly, I thought it was like a great story to hear, but the biggest thing is just hearing and seeing all the pictures. I think it's really fun. I thought it's like a nice relaxing thing to hang out to. You could definitely be like cooking dinner. You don't need to hear every single line word about it. It's just a nice, fun, relaxing hangout documentary. You can kind of think about a fantasy you'll never live. If you like the podcast, please feel free to give it a 5-star review on iTunes, like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, because we're on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. And overall, I just want to let you guys know that I love you in the most platonic way possible. Have a nice day. Bye.